We're going to talk about Southend. Does Southend need to have more road and rail connections? Could that be its key to becoming a city? Well, ambitious plans have been unveiled by the Borough Council that could see another river crossing built to Kent and the extension of the Crossrail train line from Shenfield. This is something called Southend 2050, and we can talk now to Councillor James Courtney, the Conservative Deputy Leader of the Council, a bit more about it. Morning, James.
Good morning, Sonia.
Morning. Just outline some of the key features then in Southend 2050.
Yeah, firstly, I'm just looking at my mug, checking it's not got my name on, so that's quite good. Nice, and it's a nice, boring brown mug, so hopefully I won't have to resign anytime soon. But, Southend 2050 has been a project that we've been undertaking for probably nearly a year or so now, talking to a vast number of residents. We've spoken to over 4,000 residents, working out where we want Southend to be in 2050, and then sort of working out the journey for us getting there. So a lot more things in the future are done in a joined up fashion. You've picked up on a couple of points there. Putting all those points together, really, it's the infrastructure that we need to allow us to expand over the next 10, 20, 30 years to ensure that we can go east to west, we can go into London and that people can come from London into Southend, but also something that a lot of Essex struggles with is travelling further north to south.
So in an ideal world, James, if your vision it becomes reality, what do you want to see Southend have in the long term?
Well, in the long term, we want us to be somewhere that's, maintains its, the historic nature with the pier, historic buildings, but also is somewhere that's really sort of, fun and enjoyable to live in, easy to get into, easy to get out of, where people are able to be, active in their private lives, but also able to work more locally and being able to sort of, prosper in Southend. And one of those things is going to be additional infrastructure, but also looking at digital infrastructure as well, sort of, becoming market leading in the connectivity that we've got through internet connection, much faster broadband, as well as being able to physically move, to different towns and cities.
Can you see why perhaps the suggestion of another river crossing, in addition to the Lower Thames, the extension of Crossrail to Shenfield, the airport's getting bigger and busier as well? Can you see why people might be slightly alarmed at hearing these sort of ideas? Yeah,
well, I think one of the reasons that we've looked at 2050 rather than 2020 or 2025 is to look at the much longer term so that we can plan for these things. I mean, if you go back to 1986, the Dartford Bridge hadn't even been started. Dartford Bridge didn't open until 1991. The second tunnel only opened in 1980. So, 2050 is quite a way off. So we need to be looking at the longer term plans for that there. And we're not just talking about building another road bridge. One of the things that we would like to see, and one of the things, to be honest, probably slightly missed a trickle with the third crossing, is a multimodal crossing. Why can't you get the train, over to Kent and elsewhere?
Very ambitious, but how
London
realistic
first?
Is that, James? How realistic's that?
Well, I think people would have said that about the third crossing probably 5 or 10 years ago. So I think it's only right that over the medium to long term we look to campaign to keep Southend on the map and to be able to get the infrastructure that we need for us to be able to expand. The airport is expanding, well, so we need to ensure that we've got the connectivity to get in and out of there. If we don't do anything, what we're actually going to do is just have the A127 and A13 chock-a-block. So that's why we need to look at additional infrastructure. And one of the other things we're looking at is a third road, in and out of Southend, a sort of relief road to be able to go all the way to Shoebury, slightly further north than where the current major roads are, connecting up to the A130.
Where's all the money going to come for these plans, James?
Well, some of it's going to come from us locally, and some of this is going to have to come from national government to fund this. There is money there for infrastructure projects when you can demonstrate what the economic benefits are going to be. I think it's something we can't shy away from, that government wants a lot more housing, particularly in the southeast. And one of the things that we say in Southend is we're happy to provide this additional housing, but only if we have the infrastructure to go with it. And that includes things more than just transport. It includes, schools, hospitals, doctors' surgeries, and such like. So we need all of that to be able to deliver that housing, which actually a lot of residents and people nearby to Southend need.
James Courtenay, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Conservative Deputy Leader of the Council. Get back to drinking out of your mug this morning. Thanks to you. Michael Hoy is a Green Councillor in South Essex and represents Holbridge on Rochford District Council as well. Michael, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you make of what we've heard there, these ambitious plans, a third crossing, a river crossing into Kent from Southend and an extension of Crossrail to Southend in the long-term future?
Yes, some of it is quite interesting and would be good, such as the Crossrail link. I don't think there would be much opposition to improving the railway services from Southend into London and beyond, which Crossrail would do. As far as I can tell from the plans, though, it would run on the existing track, which would be fine, but I'm not sure how the current timetable would be affected by having additional trains on there or taking out some of the current services to be replaced by Crossrail services. So I think it's obviously their thoughts are at very, very early days on that. With regard to the road crossings or multi-mode crossings, I think he said, as soon as you start building roads, you just start creating more traffic, more users for those roads. I think I can quite safely say that there's no large town in the world that's ever solved its congestion problem by creating more roads. It just makes it worse. You attract more traffic, attract more pollution.
But if no one's moving at the moment and businesses can't function, that's also problematic in itself, isn't it, Michael?
But that's probably another thing missing from the report. They talk about alternative uses of transport, but there isn't a lot of mention of what they are. So, for instance, I know in Holbridge there's a building taking place where there's £100,000 going towards a new cycle route between between Southend and Chelmsford, for instance. I know it's a cycle route, but it would, and that's a long way to cycle to work. But it's a start on creating alternative types of transport which are available to people. There's not anything mentioned in there about buses or encouraging people to use buses, new bus routes, reliable bus services, and more of them. This is the sort of thing we need, rather than constantly trying to make car use easier. I know that sounds terrible. I know, but because a lot of us have to rely on cars, and I understand that myself. I have to rely on a car at the moment because I don't find the public transport reliably enough for me to use.
It comes down to the debate on whether we should get around with public transport or cars, doesn't it, really?
It's not necessarily one or the other. It's perhaps using public transport more in your cars, less if possible, and all different sorts of cars. Obviously, if you're perhaps going to replace a car in the next few years, you'd hopefully, as I would if I was going to, would consider at the moment trying to buy an electric car, which at the time of use of it, obviously the emissions are effectively zero, as long as obviously your energy you're charging your car with is clean energy.
Well, that's an interesting point, Michael, because these plans are sort of long-term plans. You heard James saying there about Southend 2050, and we're all going to be driving electric cars in the future, so pollution's not really going to be an issue, is it?
It may be electric cars, or it may be another alternative form. Electric cars will be very ambitious. They certainly won't be sold at the moment in 2050. Hopefully they won't be sold a lot earlier. Diesel or petrol won't be sold a lot earlier than that. But it's still the congestion factor. If we're all relying on cars still to be built will still be creating CO2, and they'll still be affecting climate change if they're being built. So just because it's one of these things where you have to be very careful. You can't say one thing or the other.
Okay.
Not one thing is good and everything else is bad. It's a mixture of how they all work together.
Michael, we will have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us.
Travel news from BBC Essex.